The hairdresser loomed before me, and I knew in an instant I was social prey. She had buzzed her hair, had to be at least 200 pounds, and had applied golden glitter to the top of her eyebrows. Golden glitter? Never a good sign. I sat down in her chair and literally thought to myself, well, just because she's weird doesn't mean she's an incompetent hairdresser. Have a curiosity frame, Alex. She turns me toward the mirror and says, you know, I can tell the type of trauma people have by their hair. I look at her quizzically. Interesting. How? I majored in religious studies. Bad energy flows from the parents to children, and somehow people expect you to just be okay. But it's not like that. Generational trauma is spiritual, you know? She takes her first cut at my hair, and my stomach rolls into a knot. Oh no. The Tibetan monks, they live on just energy from the universe for 3 to 4 months at a time. I haven't been there, yo. I haven't got to that place. I still have to eat meat. You know, it was because man started eating meat that we all have trauma. That's when everything went downhill. The thought lurks behind my forced attempt at curiosity as I come to fully grasp my situation. I'm trapped in the chair of an unhealthy ENFP, aren't I? Despite my sneaking a suspicion of impending doom, I remained engaged and tried to contribute when I could, get a word in edgewise. Yeah, the power of the mind is pretty crazy. Have you read Joe Disperza's book about the placebo effect? She lit up. I haven't, but I've heard of it. I think that's why my car broke down, because I didn't have enough, faith to believe in it. If my car was just a rock that, magically flew through the air, I wouldn't have any trouble believing it. But, some complex machine? That's way too complicated for me. I just can't believe in it. At this point, she dropped her comb, and as she went to move to the other side, she dropped it again. And she rambled on. I have a vitamin B deficiency. It makes holding things hard, you know? She took another step, and I blinked twice myself. You just dropped it twice. How'd you do that? She picked it up for that second time. See, if I were more than a priestess, I wouldn't be like this. It's because my aura isn't strong enough. That's why my body still needs vitamins. I peered at her through the mirror, trying to hide my growing disenchantment with my current situation. Curiosity frame, Alex. Curiosity frame, I urged myself. So, you think if you just willed it, you wouldn't need search for nutrients? She buzzed around my ear. Oh, certainly. Everything is mental. This is all a 3D projection. Science only goes up to a point and then we don't know. The rest is God. At that precise moment, she stopped cutting my hair and continued to ramble on. I felt my soul wither within me. My eyes darted from her razor and then back again. Oh, no. Don't just start talking to me, I thought frantically. I gave a terse, uninterested response, but she was unfazed. We're all gods, you know. Cut my hair, lady! I will listen to you ramble about meaningless nonsense. For goodness sake, ramble while you cut my hair! My eyes locked onto hers, my stare intensifying as if I could, cause her to resume. She did not. So instead I pivoted, engaging her in her eccentric conversation by adding natural endpoints in hopes that, upon reaching the end of her train of thought, she might realize she was being paid to do a very specific task, none of which involved anything she was doing at the exact moment. It proved to be a fatal mistake. My engagement only gave her fuel, and I found myself 7 minutes later still talking to her through the mirror, and not a snip further into my haircut. I tried a more direct approach. You know, given your spiritual inclinations, why did you go into hair cutting? Like magic, the hairdresser snapped from her conversational daze and raised her scissors to my hair. Internally, I fell to my knees. Oh, thank the Lord! Finally, Oops. My heart froze, and for the first time, my expression reflected my true feelings. What do you mean? Oops, I thought. The hairdresser didn't look up. I forgot what we were doing, so I took too much off the top. But here, let me just... She snipped some more, and I sat flabbergasted as she did what she could to rectify her mistake. There, she exclaimed. Now where were we? Past that point, I honestly don't remember a single thing she said. Until then, I was listening, albeit discontently, but after she failed at the one task she had been hired to do, my TE just couldn't take it anymore. That woman did not deserve my curiosity. After 7 more stops and starts to my actual haircutting experience, with at least one more 5-minute gap in which she just talked to me, and I didn't get a haircutting done, she eventually and finally released me. After I stepped out of the chair, I felt a spark of life come back into my being. I paid as little as I could, as quickly as I could, and then I burst from the barber shop like my life depended on it. When I got into my car, I sat there for just a few moments, allowing myself to take in all that I had just experienced. Curiosity, bruised and battered from its abuse, gradually turned, and as I drove home, I marveled at the depravity of competence possible in this world. Forget the problem of evil, what about the problem of incompetence? I came to the conclusion that God must really love incompetent people, because boy did he make a lot of them. And also, I made a mental note to thank every ENFP I see from then on for being so coherent and intelligent. I now understand how far they've come. That whole experience was traumatizing. I don't want to talk about it. The days are long, but the years are short, they say. I feel like it's more like these life updates are long, but but the takeaways are always short. But lol, who am I to complain about my own creation, especially since I have the full capacity to change it, and I have a complete and dogged unwillingness to even consider doing so. It's just how life of deals are. They've always been that way, and they always will be. Call it my SI. Anyway, I was still in school when the last life of deal left off, so I attended class, did surveys, and then the professor rambled about something unimportant, and so I just ignored him. Speaking of which, what grade did I end up for that class? My curiosity is piqued, so give me a moment. Na 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 na. Actually, probably no one knows the Jeopardy theme song anymore, do they? The only reason I know that is because my grandparents used to play it. Anyway, so have you ever gone to go see if you got an A and instead find out you owe $2,000 you didn't know you owe? Yeah, kind of puts a downer on the whole experience. But I did get the A. So, anyway, that whole experience just sucked. Oof. Let me just, sit back into my financial ruin for a hot sec. Okay, and we're back. Moving on. Once I got back from class, I read, attended work, finished another cancer book, finished crafting the last life meal, did a King Super Run with Grace for a questionably healthy food before watching Hilda and taking all the pills. I then did a stare as Grace and Emerson talked until Ben showed up and we did racquetball together, which I lost every game. But whatever, it's fine. They were still good games. I then wasted time for a bit before going over to Ben's house and watching the Lego Batman movie, which is genuinely so good, with him, Benj, Caleb Shaw, who I mentioned before, I think. I don't know. He's an ENTJ friend of Ben's. I don't know. There's nothing else I've said about him. The next morning was stupid, though, because I didn't have chemo, yet they had still scheduled me for a lab, so I had to drive all the way to Longmont for a stupid lab, which didn't even tell me anything useful. That was just the dumbest. If that happens again, I think I'm just not going to go. Upon getting home, I did Funime, played an hour of Baldur's Gate, typed said aforementioned Caleb Shaw, and then also got Rebecca's true type. She's an ISFP, not an INFP. And we all had a very interesting and good Myers-Briggs conversation until I left for a scheduled talk with Neo. See, Neo and my friendship was in a very rough patch, so I was like, hey, you hurt me, and I hurt you, so let's talk about it. And it actually went really well. Well enough that I, in fact, might try and do relationship science with Neo. Ask me about it if you're curious. Anyway, once I got back, I was a tad cooked, so I just watched anime. Hilda took some pills before going to sleep. I had class on Thursday, attended for some exam reviews, which was like the only pseudo-important class I attended that semester. And it was at this point that I started working on compiling all my reading into a cancer book. So, no more reading! You don't understand how done I am reading about cancer. Like, I'm actually so done. I've read a total of 31 books about cancer and health generically, not counting the mental health and psychology ones. Counting those goes to like 40 in the last year. And so, of course, I've taken extensive notes of them all, and I am now, I think, finally well-educated enough to start writing a meta-summary. See, the trouble is, it's not like there aren't more things to read. Like, I have at least 3 books on my shelf that I'm like, yeah, I'll admit that those are probably important, and I should probably know what's in those books. But gosh darn it, you gotta stop somewhere, and frankly, I'm kind of burnt out. So yes, I pivoted to organizing my notes, which, for any of you that have seen my raw notes, you will know this is no trivial task. And that's where I'm at in the cancer book writing process. Mostly I've just been really busy, but we'll get to that. Anyway, I just stood in the sun for like 20 minutes before going to work, got home, worked out, did some Funime, some Baldur's Gate, then hung out with Grace Emerson, the work friend. This guy named Reese has been pretty cool as of late. After that, I drove to Nessa's house and talked with her and Benj about a revised plan for the IO trip, which as of now has been downsized, but in a surprisingly happy way. And we decided that including Nessa's bestie as our 4th was the best play. And I would say that's a surprisingly good call. Anna is great. Big fun. Once I sorted that out, I drove home, did a little bit of Baldur's Gate before going to bed, and then slept. At work the next day, I ordered all the things I need to start my cooking career, because I'm going to be learning how to do that. I technically have started, but, I only cooked once, so I don't really think that counts. I then helped run HES Fest, which in effect meant I got paid to play spike ball, which was actually really great, because the HES majors are pretty skilled. So yeah, I also got free food. Once I got done with that, with work, namely, I did live video stuff, played chess with the bro, and then talked some. Ben is getting better, so the second game actually I switched out to a rook down instead of a queen down in order to beat him. Grace joined us for that at the tail end of that time at Alley Cat. I then came back home, watched Hilda, took pills, did small stuff, had a drive with Emerson and a decent talk, at the end of which I got canes with her. And then attended. I then watched the end of at the end of Anohana, which is such a good anime. And yeah, that was the day. I was notably sore the next day from all the spike ball I played, but lol, I managed to hobble through. I read some more in the morning, did Funime, did my first serious attempt at cooking, and actually did really well. What I made tasted really good. Thank you, Katie's mom, for your wisdom and TE. I then played way too much Baldur's Gate, that game is super addictive, and journaled, and then slept. The next day at church was a very typical church day, except that Jake decided he actually wanted to listen to the sermon and did not want to walk. After the service ended, I did some socializing. Nessa granted me an OK cinnamon roll, which I consumed at Jake's house as we talked about a battery of topics. He's, always having somebody talk about with Jake. I then did Baldur's Gate and took my pills. See, the one nice thing about Baldur's Gate is that it has turn-based combat, so there can be some significant downtime between my turns and the enemy's turns. Essentially, since I'm, trying to beat the whole game without a party, that means just my main character is there, so the action economy is not in my favor. Hence, I end up watching goblins chase after me for 3 minutes each turn. So the game is excellent for taking pills. However, I was pulled from that game because Emerson's butthurt SE ego decided it really wanted to go swimming in the frigid cold reservoir. Hence, after some persuasion, she got me and Grace to go along. However, the strongest memory I have from that little excursion is that on the way there was this ranger guy walking across a crosswalk, and I was admittedly speeding. But by the time, I would have reached him, he would have been all the way across the crosswalk, so I didn't slow down, because who cares, right? However, he took it upon himself to stop in the middle of the crosswalk and try to tell me to slow down, but I didn't. I just swerved around him. And there was still a good foot of tour space, so I wasn't almost hitting the guy, but still the memory stuck, because it was kind of a yikes kind of memory, and also my dude, you made this unsafe kind of memory. Ever since that point, I've been hypersensitive to all the old people telling me to slow down, and it's without fail, grumpy old SI people. I just hating on my SE and caring about safety. Are they objectively right? Almost certainly yes. I drive fast, but also heck no way am I going to give up that fun for safety. Yeah, I know I just received the scorn of half of you because lol, all the SI in the world, but I know at least one of you thinks I'm base, so it's worth it. So yes, I made it to the reservoir and did a swim, and it was very cold. Grace and Emerson took forever to get in, over 5 minutes of gradual submersion. Apparently that's just how SI works. But then once they got in, Grace was all proud that she wouldn't get out, despite the fact that she lost blood circulation to her toes, and they were all discolored. And then when she finally did get out, she was like, that was a bad decision. I was like, yeah. It was, I don't know, SI is whack when it's low on the stack. But anyway, it was pretty fun, big different, and that made it worth it. Once we got back, it was Mother's Day, hence we had a special Mother's Day's meal, which Emerson joins for as a vicarious treat, because she's basically one of those now. And then the three of us, Grace, Emerson, and I, went to go quest to get Mom custard, which should have taken 10 minutes, but really actually took us over an hour for various pragmatic complications. Hence, we did eventually come back, desserts in tow, but my TE died. I then played Baldur's Gate, read, and did some healthy snacks for a bit before journaling and going to sleep. The next day at work was mostly filled with working on my new organized no stock. I then just spontaneously, because it was such a nice day, decided to play at Joe's house for Monday night instead of driving. And here is the route I took. It was 15.5 miles. I kept up a 10-ish mile per hour pace the whole way and literally did make it basically on time. I was 6 minutes late, so whatever. I think I did pretty well. But I was definitely cooked once I arrived. I wish more people had desire to do stuff like that with me, because I honestly enjoy that. It's only bench that will ever do stuff like that with me. Also, I saw a snake on the way there. Gaze. Of course, there was Monday night stuff that occurred until Neon City gave me a ride back. I then watched Hilda, Old Vines, with Grace for a bit. The humor was definitely better back in the day. The Old Vines, peak. Before reading and then journaling at 10 of my night. The next morning, I did all the small things, did vial cleaning and filling, and then it was my last day at normal work. I did pills and anime upon getting home, played racquetball with Benj, got donuts with all the peoples, and then had a big MBTI talk at Ben's house, where I typed 2 of his creator friends and gave them info, which was good. But the conversation devolved, and since I had carpooled there, I was stuck there until 2 in the morning, so that sucked, because I was bored. The next morning, I had chemo, during which I noticed a very odd behavioral trend, namely that I played it extraordinarily chill. I would be they'd be ready for the poke, and I'd be leans back in his cancer chair, flips his sunglasses down. Yeah, sure. I mean, whatever, Try to pretend he doesn't mind being stabbed by a needle, but clearly minds. That was me. I mean, not quite, but basically. I don't know why I did that. But regardless, I made it through chemo. It was mega rainy and windy, and my bald tires kept having me slip on the water as I drove home from the interstate, but I loved the weather nevertheless. I then did Funime and anime, worked on my cancer book, played some video games, talked with Ben briefly, watched Hilda with Grace, and then slept. AKA a pretty uneventful day. The next morning began with me making pillboxes while listening to Personality Hacker, which went well. What did not go well was the haircut I then proceeded to get, which has already been described in detail. After which, I emotionally recovered from that experience. I worked out, read some, had an actually really good conversation with Mom, and then went straight from there to Liam's, where we played a game of Root, in which me, Alan, Noah, and Liam all played, which was tolerable. But it was only because of Liam that I won in the end, so my victory felt hollow. But, oh well. Such is the plight of the occasional board game. Hollow victories. Once I got back, I watched Arcane with Mom, ate a little healthier, and then I rounded out the night by playing Baldur's Gate for a few hours. The next day, I worked at setting up and helping run a little event for HES grads for 4 hours, got free food, and had semi-forced conversations with my ESTJ coworker, because she was the only person I knew there. But, I've experienced worse. Once I got back home, I did the usual food and anime combo, as well as pills. I then went and had a very serious talk with Nessa at Alley Cat, which actually went very well. And let's see, after that, I just played more Baldur's Gate, and then I watched Hilda and Arcane for a bit while eating and taking pills, and then finally that night, Ben and I went on a spontaneous deep emotional drive, which was probably one of the best conversations we've ever had. The next day, it began with Caleb Myers and I hanging out. We drove to Esses and then talked through to see if his type of ESTP was right, which, after talking about it, I think we both agreed that it tracked. But the more exciting bit was how Caleb intends to grow. I'm very excited to see that. Once we got there, Caleb took me to this place that was actually really good for fish and chips. And then we went to an escape room together, and we barely cleared it with literally a minute 30 to spare. Although we were a really good team, so it was a good escape room. Lots of fun. Here's a picture of us. I didn't say it was a particularly good picture, but in the world of curation, imperfection is of the greater value. Anyway, we killed that room, and upon heading back, just listened to music, and it was chill. Very good hangout. Upon return, I did food and anime. Then Jake and I talked for 3 hours, and that was quite the conversation. Probably the most significant Jake and I have had yet. And it changed quite a lot for me. I actually got pretty emotional during it. So yeah, I grant that is vague, but the nature of the subject matter demands it. So yeah, you won't get to know anything more. But trust me, that 3.5 hours were quite significant and well spent. Then, with that, I ended the day with funime and pills. Sunday, I had to skip church because I had a work event I had to run. And it was definitely more work than I usually experience at work, since I helped set up and tear down a 300-person event. But it was good, and Maya and I handled it quite well. Here are the pictures. That took a hot sec, 5 hours or so, and it went off without a hitch. So huzzah. I then went on a run right after that happened, before heading to Micah's grad party, which was actually really fun. I had some Spikeball games with Lydia, Sam, and a dude that wasn't important, and that was actually pretty great. And then I met my old CEC advisor, and we had a really good conversation that encompassed a number of topics until a nerd sniffed me out and then hijacked the combo. It was then deep into that conversation that I realized that I told Mom I'd be home by 5:30, and it was 5:45. So I yeeted myself unceremoniously, rushed home, only to find my presence was not actually required, and then I had, been basically led to believe that my presence was far more significant than it was. So I regretted my life decisions because I was actually really enjoying that party. Solid 8 out of 10 gathering, Micah, and sad. And yeah, basically just cried in a corner. I didn't actually cry. Okay, anyway. I started hanging out with Ben, BB, and Aiden, but then it was boring, so I dipped, and then I played Baldur's Gate instead. Then a host of people appeared in my living room, and banter ensued, which I enjoyed with joyful glee. Yeah, which I watched with joyful glee. And then David, Ben, Emerson, Grace, Katie, and I all traveled in and out, but in 2 cars. And my car was the Emerson and Katie car. Hence, Katie and I were regaled with a solid 30 minutes of Emerson fawning over this hot guy she met touring GCU in elaborate detail. Apparently, Noah is the epitome of manhood. Sorry, Molly. Gilbert's been replaced. So yeah, that was honestly pretty hilarious. It got a tad old at the end of the drive, but for the most part, I enjoyed it. While we were there, we did small talk before driving back, and it was just, a good time. I think the next day was Monday, but it could have been Tuesday, because I don't remember days. Regardless, I gave the buff talk, in which I explained the secrets of buffness, punctuated by Cannon's subtle comments about his absolutely jacked glutes. It's a hard life, man. You really do suffer. And after that ended, Joe was the only one to ask questions, so lol, thanks for existing, Joe. If you want a recording of that, by the way, let me just know. I then got refitted at Men's Warehouse because they gave me the wrong size pants by way too much. And from there, it was to funime, working out, and then Benj and I carpooled to Monday nights, and I had a really good talk, honestly, on the way there. That Monday night, which was the last one, by the way, for a while, because Joe and Karina are getting married. Whoa, they actually have already gotten married. We then did normal Monday night stuff, but it was special for once, since, it was the last one. And it's funny how that happens, boring things become interesting once there's no more of them. Also, Benj and I got to do a lot of 1v1s, which I enjoy far more than usual Magic. We then played a group game of Magic, and I won. Super humble about it. And then the night ended with Grace and I watching Hilda, and we went to sleep. Next morning, I did cancer book work. I made myself some great food. Tasty, well worth it. I did funime, read my cancer book before going to thrift store shopping, originally for shoes, because stinking Neo asked Lydia what color pants and shoes she wanted for her wedding, when previously John had told me that my pants and shoes I owned were acceptable. The analogy most apt to describe how I felt about this is like watching a kid in class remind the teacher that, we had a quiz today. And to be fair, Neo did pay for a third of the, pants in, penance for his heir, but it, only made me a little bit less salty. I wouldn't have had to pay for the other 2/3 of the pants if he hadn't asked it. So, yeah, oh well. But regardless, I now had to get tan shoes and pants, and so I went thrift store shopping, and I managed to find some good shoes, but then while I was there, I stumbled upon good shirts, and I was like, screw money, wardrobe overhaul! And I bought a ton of clothes, and completely redid my wardrobe, and I like it better now. Once I got back from that, I played racquetball. Nessa, Benj, and I went to drive and had a really good combo, and then Grace and I watched Hilda before going to sleep. The next morning began with chemo, during which Johanna and I called, and I discussed her idea for an entrance ceremony stuff for Joe and Karina's wedding, since we were walking together, and I really liked the idea, so we got to work on that. Once the poison was safely in my veins, I then took some pills and got stopped partway through that process because the chemo was like, hello, I would like to make you feel sick, and I was like, I feel bad. But nevertheless, I did manage to pack for John's wedding in my chemo sickness state and finish washing all my new clothes and organizing them. After that, I drove around with Grace and the gang for a time, and here's a picture, and we jammed out very hard to some very good music. It was actually a blast. We then spontaneously added Reese to the mix, Grace and Emerson's work friend, and then I took us driving very safely through the Risk Canyon, which was great and big of fun. Then that night, I talked with Ben before going to sleep. I got poor sleep that night since I was thinking about the trip to John's wedding the next day, but it was all good. I arrived at Noah and Catherine's house at the appropriate time, and we departed. The small talk was okay, but like draining because it was 3 hours. And I just don't have that much steam. So I eventually kind of just went kind of quiet. But until then, we had some mildly interesting combos, and I got to hang with Noah during the baby feeding and changing stops, so that was good. We went straight to this church in this tiny little town of La Junta, and let me say that I hate small towns. I don't know if it's because it reminds me of Kansas, and I hate Kansas, or it just makes me realize how insignificant and trivial my life is, but, you know, something about small towns really rubs me the wrong way. They're also just plain ugly and uncomfortable, so it could just be that. Regardless, we met at this okayly nice church. John showed up characteristically late to his own rehearsal, no less, and then we all practiced standing, which is a procedure that baffles me, because it is in fact not hard to stand in a particular place, and I do not feel like I need practice, but it would seem I'm more competent than most. I actually feel this about most every area of life, but I digress. So yes, stood around, and then we headed out to the place we're going to camp, which, might I say, 1, camping in the plains is not very good camping, and 2, camping at night before the wedding is a mega stupid idea because no one ever sleeps while camping. But hey, I was just along for the ride. Speaking of which, Dustin, my guess is an ESTP, gave me a ride, and we had a very interesting conversation in the hour or something drive. He gave me a whole new perspective on life that I haven't ever had before, like a different species of perspective. I don't know how to put this, but it felt like I was hearing, as I was hearing his story and what he cared about, it was as though I was talking to someone from a different country or like a different planet. Like, I understood him, but I didn't understand him. Like, not really. Like, he grew up in a town of 600 people on the plains. Like, that's just so different from how I was raised. So yeah, it was very informative and interesting, and I felt the experience was valuable, just because I'd never encountered someone like that before. Once I made it to camp, I set up my tent. Nathan, the best man organizing this, made meat, and it was just meat wrapped in meat, wrapped in meat. The stuff of men and heart attacks. Here's a picture. And also, as you can see, we were next to a very shallow lake, which actually, you know, got very pretty at sunset. Here's a picture of that. Also, there's Jeremy in this photo, if you can spot him. As the food was being crafted, the alcohol was cracked open, and it all went downhill from there. Neo and I drank sparsely. I had 2 apple ciders, and I think Neo had 5, so he was feeling it, but, you know, still sparse compared to the other guys. And one guy, Jonathan, was underage, so he didn't drink at all. But John, Nathan, Dustin, and Jeremy, especially Jeremy, drank. To be fair, I knew this would happen. Like, I've been around drunk John fairly often, and what I didn't see coming was the personal floodgates of secrets that would come from Jeremy. Like, holy cow, drunk Jeremy says everything. And I do mean everything. It was both disturbing and deeply intriguing. I know Jeremy much better now, though he doesn't remember any of it, so very one-way increase in knowledge. So yeah, drinking and talking around the fire until midnight, and it wasn't actually half bad. Obviously not my ideal bachelor party, but it was certainly a unique experience, and the one thing I will give to the plains at that hour is that, an hour from the nearest grocery store, is that, like, they have really good stars. So yeah, I turned in for the night, got poor sleep as always, probably about 4 hours, and rose with the sun. I helped people pack up the next morning, because Neo, John, and Jonathan just left us clean up. And then I rode back with Dustin, only to sit around for a while when nothing happened. Oh, except eventually this. The picture is John's dad in a dress sneaking up behind him. John went to pray in front of the church, and as he was finished up, his dad put on a dress and snuck up behind him. Okay, apparently I said that. Good talk. John's face when he turned was actually fantastic. But yes, eventually when things happened, they were married, and then I, being sleep deprived, mostly sat in a detached position, in a detached fashion at every available opportunity between pictures and car painting and so forth. However, I did eventually decide to socialize, and then once, dancing started, I finally got my gusto back, because I actually had a really good time. Dancing is really fun, particularly when you have no regard for self-dignity, which is a skill I have recently acquired. So yeah, at the end of the wedding, the end of the wedding was great, the start sucked, and overall it was decent. Once John and Olivia drove off into the sunset, Neo, Sydney, Jeremy, Catherine, Nolan, and I went to a place with so-so food, but it was the first room that I'd had in ages, so I loved it. It was then that I was going to watch Lego Batman with everybody, but I became super tired, so I was like, I'm just going to go sleep instead. I booked a hotel room for that night, by the way. And honestly, it's probably the best sleep I've had in a hot sec. Upon waking, Sydney did a call with the personality hacker people. She let me say hi to Joel, which was really nice of her. Super appreciate that. And during that time, Neo and I had a what should the nature of our friendship be talk, which went really well. From there, I bought way too much pizza, was shown the high school of yore in Colorado Springs, because Neo and Sydney love to talk about their high school experience. Got good smoothies before going back to Noah's place, where my car was. And however, before I got out, Sydney brought up a grievance that she had about something I rudely said to her at the wedding, which I genuinely, was in the wrong there, so fair enough. And we started talking about it, but a bit of the way through, Neo was like, hey, we're not going to finish this couple right now. And I was like, yeah, fair enough. I then got home and went straight into trash bagging with the Grace Gang, Reese, and this sketch guy, which had a really good car. Also, by trash bagging, I mean poking your arms and legs through trash bags and then sliding down the hills after it just rained. However, we originally went to Fossil Creek for that, only to discover the hills were so-so, and then we left. And the process, the sketch guy with the cool car gave me and Reese a drive, and he raced some dude through the neighborhoods at like 60 miles per hour, and the guy almost hit him. And then proceeded to drift and speed, quite literally and illegally, but ethically, back to CSU. See, in some sense, this man is all that I want to be. His control over his car was genuinely impressive, and in every other sense, he was someone I did not want to be. He did not give off good vibes. Regardless, though, at the little hill of CSU and at the little hill at CSU, the trash bagging that did not occur at Fossil Creek Park did occur, and here's a picture Katie took, which I'm not in, but it gives you the gist. Once we got back from that, I talked with the girls about why I thought the cool car guy was sketchy and they should stay away from him, and it was seen that later facts validated my intuition. The next day I attended church, but Jake decided not going to walk, and I had something to talk with Benj about, so I had to walk with him instead. And that was a pretty good conversation. I then talked with Jake for two and a half-ish hours, 45 minutes of which was literally spent waiting for someone to just talk to us at Men's Warehouse. I'm developing a vitriol cave for that place. However, we did eventually get served, and they still had the pants too big. They gave me the same size they did last time after I asked them to size it down. So I went in to reorder, but it turns out that they didn't arrive in time, so I had to wear oversized pants to the wedding. But more on that later. My talk with Jake ended because my time to talk with Rebecca had come, and that was actually a really enjoyable conversation. Unlike last time, Rebecca came with clear questions and thoughts, and I really appreciate it. Very big bueno. Plus, she bought me canes in exchange for my services, so that was also great. After that, I worked out, attended Eliana's grad party, which was probably the most uncomfortable social environment I've been in ages, but thankfully, Eliana pulled her boyfriend aside and told him to play spikeball with me. And while the first game was kind of meh, because Will and his friends weren't that good, once they ducked out, some other high schoolers filled in, and this, 14-year-old kid, the kid was insane. Almost as good as me at 14, and genuinely, crazy skilled. We won, every game we played together. So yeah, I ended up having some really, really good games of spikeball. Probably the best games I've had in, last year. And we played for, 2 hours until it got dark. And it was super fun. So, in the end, I was very glad I came. Once I got home, I took some pills and watched the rest of Zootopia with Mom and Grace, played a bit of Baldur's Gate, and then rested my consciousness. The next morning was Memorial Day, which, of course, meant Memorial Day soccer, and Benj and I both attended, and we both did really well. I think Ben scored 4 goals, and I scored 3 or something like that. And it was super fun, and it reminded me how much I like soccer, so I'm going to be hopefully playing that more. Afterwards, however, I was, of course, cooked, hence I just did chill things for the rest of the day. I did pills, worked a bit on my cancer book, took a nap, more pills, then waited at Ben's house for a promised conversation with his new creator guy for 2 hours, which sucked. But then it turned out it was worth it because Drew, his creator camp guy, was an ENTJ, and also a very interesting person. Naturally. So we talked till 12:30, and we called it there, and I wanted to sleep. The next day was Joe's bachelor party, the goings-ons of which were entirely unknown to Joe, but we started off with volleyball, which sucked until Joe's friends Pierce and Marshall showed up, and that was actually really fun. Those guys are great. I would really like to get to know them better. After that, we drove to Denver to eat okay Indian food and stayed there way too long. Took a meandering route back to Joe's house. That's throw him off. Courtesy of me. And we played Magic and Halo minigames the rest of the night. They were all, it was they were all very big gamers, so it was a very epic LAN party, which here's a picture. I then carpooled home with Caleb and had a pretty good conversation with him on the way back, and then I talked with Katie, Emerson, and Grace about mostly nothing until 1 in the morning. I began the next day by driving all the way down to Denver for my first ever therapy session. Yay! Jazz hands. And, yeah, that was unpleasant, but I assume good. I think I did get a good guy, though. And, I better have, because, finding an arm guy who wasn't maxed out with clients was very hard to do. Plus, I'm paying him obtuse amounts of money. I listened to all this new music on the way back, talked with Mama Noodles for a hot sec, and then attended Joe and Karina's practice wedding, after which I got free food and had a debate with Noah. I left early because I was bored, joined Ben, Drew, and Drew's girlfriend, I forgot her name, in the hot tub and started a philosophical conversation, because Drew, being a fellow ENTJ, is actually into those, yay, which we then continued over at Ben's house, and I thought it actually went really well. I hope I actually made a difference in Ben and Drew's lives. At least, I felt like I did. I then employed Ben's INFJ wisdom on how to handle this situation, and he gave me some FE and questionable solutions, which I refused to employ because it felt wrong. But I still appreciate the insight. The next morning, I got to be productive and catch up on all the things that I had been putting off, which felt really good. I then joined Grace to meet up with Reagan from Ellerslie, if you remember him. And we played lane volleyball and then some okay spikeball. Grace and I were on a team, so that was fun. And then I met Reagan's sister, who turns out to be an ENFJ, so that was interesting and cool. After talking with her for a bit, I went over to the Myers house for the planned Nessa, Benj, and Anna hang, which, actually, yeah, was fantastic. We departed, and it took Anna a little bit to, warm up. But once she got warm, she was super fun. And, yeah, we had probably some of the best vibe I've experienced for a hot sec. We did an escape room, and we crushed it, because we're all geniuses. Here's a picture. And then we got good food at the place Caleb showed me, and I tried to sing in the car, while other people succeeded at singing in the car all the way back. Genuinely pretty peak. The last thing I did that night was I gave a bit of thought to the speech that I was going to be giving at Joe's wedding tomorrow, and then I went to bed. Now, as for said at wedding, the first order of business, at least for me, was having functional pants. See, the dress pants had no belt loops, and the little adjuster things at the minimum size made me look like I was one of those gangsters where they wear their pants to their thighs. However, thankfully, April became my surrogate mom and was like, come over this corner and drop your pants. Not actually, but basically. It took a bit, but thankfully she was able to use the power of safety pins to slim my waistline, so they actually stayed up. Hence, I achieved pants, a pretty crucial achievement for weddings, I imagine. But yes, I got my pants fixed, which I was mega grateful for, and then there were many pictures, and the ceremony happened, and I was driving on my way back to the reception when my tire just popped, so that was fun. And then Benj came and picked us up. Thank you, Benj. Thereafter, Johanna and I walked and threw shirts of beauty, aka Joe and Karina's face with a witty quote, to the crowd. Honestly, a pretty good entrance. And then I ate food, pondered my speech, mostly winged it, and then, mostly winged it. I did do a little bit of prep the night before, and I gave it some thought, just giving like the gist. So it wasn't like pure winging it, but I didn't read anything or memorize any lines, so I would say it was still winging it. And yeah, except for right at the end, I actually did really well at the speech. After the dancing happened, Noah and I made very questionable decisions with negative regard for our self-esteem. I then failed to do some line dances, and it was fun. And then I was tired. I didn't stick around for the cleanup because I had a spare tire to change, and the light wasn't going to last forever. Thankfully, Caleb offered to take me home and was willing to help me with a spare. Because when we got there, it turned out my jack was mega stripped, and I couldn't jack up my own car. Thus, I needed to use Caleb's car jack, and yeah, the whole process became increasingly complicated. We ended up using like wood and literally lifting the car and just brute force to finally get the spare on. Wood apparently makes for a great jack stand in a pinch. Why was Caleb's car filled with wood? Good question. But unfortunately, only stupid questions have answers, so you're out of luck. Try again next time. So yeah, it took us probably an hour and all, but eventually we did get the spare on, and I was very grateful for Caleb, because without him and his tools, I definitely could not have done it. Plus, when I was about ready to give up, he was like, well, hold up, we might be actually able to do this, and he was right, so yay. I then drove home, raced Caleb off the line with my spare, and still won, though just barely. And yeah, finally changed out my wedding clothes, because that was kind of funny. Like, we changed our whole car in wedding clothes. Like, we're using like wood, and then our hands are like covered in oil, and it's like dress pants and dress shoes. Probably a pretty funny sight. After that, I talked with Ben for a bit. He invaded my room spontaneously, and then I played Baldur's Gate until I went to bed. I slept in the next day, did a lot of little productive things before cleaning my vials, working out, and then reading, and then I did all the chores that I put off. I felt relaxed. I then called with Michael, because he just called me out of the blue, and that was good. We had a big brain philosophy conversation. I then joined the family for food and watching something. I don't know what it was. I then played Baldur's Gate as I took my pills while doing before doing an accidental scooter into the night. And then I came up with the idea for me and Grace to go down to Fat Shack and get deep fried Oreos. So like around midnight we did that. We bought them and brought them back and then watched Hilda, and they were very tasty. The following morning consisted of small stuff reading a Katie drive because she wants to get to know me better, and we had a very decent conversation. I then did food and Hilda before being escorted by Grace and Emerson to World Market, where we planned to get Katie a birthday gift, but it was completely unnecessary for me to be a part of that process because the plan like spontaneously changed and we weren't going to buy anything from World Market because any. So yeah, they did get me home though at the time they promised though, so I'll give them that. After that, I went on to have a challenging conversation with Sydney, but with Neo's mediating help, it actually went pretty well, so big yay. I then got back, hung with the Grace game for a moment before deciding to play Baldur's Gate, and it was big fun, and I went to sleep and read a little bit before I did so. Now, as for yesterday. Yesterday was pretty packed. I started with some exceptional racquetball games with Benj. I lost them all, but we were both sweating like crazy, and we played very hard, and noticeably higher level, so it was big good. Once I got back from that, I took a hot shower, and then I went with the Grace gang and piled into Emerson's car, and I actually drove, because we were driving with Never. And we did this for Katie's birthday celebration, because her birthday was like right then. We started off by going to the Butterfly Pavilion, which was kind of lame, except for the Butterfly Park, which was cool. I remember being so much bigger when I was a kid. Like, even though it wasn't as cool as my childhood memories, it was still cool. We meandered in there for an age, of which here's a picture. Once we left, because we were all hungry, on account of Grace's SI, we drove like 45 minutes to get to IKEA, so we could eat IKEA food, which was also better in my childhood memory. And then we drove back 30 minutes to go to the aquarium, which once again was better in memory. Basically, the lesson learned is that everything is better when you were a kid, and revisit anything you thought was cool, and you shall be disappointed, and your soul shall be murdered in sadness. Anyway, here's an aquarium picture. So yeah, every individual aspect underperformed when measured by expectations, but the holistic combo of all the experiences was in fact genuinely good. Probably a 6.5 out of 10. And I think, most importantly, Katie felt really valued by it, so it was a success. Once we got home, I booked tickets, an Airbnb, and a rental car for the Sydney wedding, in which both Katie and Emerson are going to be joining me as my +1+1s. Sydney let me have 2+1s. Because of all the people I texted, they were the only ones that were crazy enough to be like, yeah, let's do that. I mean, sorry. They were fun enough, not crazy enough, to come with me. So yeah, looking forward to that. And that's how the day ended. Reese, who aforementioned has been named, called me out of the blue and was like, bro, I'm having a really hard time and I'm in a really low place. Can you come help me out? And Because I'm a soft and squishy person behind my hard veneer, I then drove 30 minutes to Greeley to try and pull him out of his spiral, only for him to like kind of listen. So yeah, I don't know if he actually took away anything, but you know, I tried to help him. Then at midnight 30, Emerson, who obviously knows Reese better than me, and we had a talk that was very significant and went on a brief drive. So yeah, I didn't get to bed until like 2 last night. And finally, as for today I woke up, got new tires on my car, did Hilda and Pills, worked on this life demo, first by myself, and then I worked on it with Grace at Breadfillow. I then got trivially swoller, worked more on this, ate more food, and did more Baldur's Gate, and then Pills, and then finally finished this. And aside from packing for Idaho tomorrow, I don't think much else is going to happen, so effectively, that marks the end of my day. Goodbye.